Pozwólcie, że przedstawić gości. Sandy Petersen z Teksasu. Designer takich gier jak Zew Cthulhu, wydane przez Chaosium. Pracował przy Runequestie, a potem przerzucił się na gry komputerowe. Robił cywilizację z Sidem Meyerem, Duma, 1, 2, Age of Empires 1, 3 i parę innych gier, jak mniej znane w Polsce Halo Wars. Wiecie, to na Xboxa taka konsola była w Ameryce.
I'm told that nobody in Poland has an Xbox.
Actually, we have 3 in the museums.
The same number as North Korea.
Yeah, but they don't have museums. Okay. Poza tym Sandy aktualnie wydaje swoje wielkie dzieło, grę planszową Cthulhu Wars, którą odpalił na Kickstarterze. Z taką ciekawostką, gra na cel $40 000, udało się zebrać ponad 1 400 000. Gra jest niesamowita, ma przepiękne, olbrzymie figurki i będzie dostępna za jakieś 2 miesiące w sprzedaży. Być może będzie polska dystrybucja.
So it's time for a brief plug of Cthulhu Wars, and I think the most convincing way to describe it.
Czy ktoś będzie potrzebował tłumaczenia? Czy są na sali osoby? Nie mówcie, nie pytam, czy nie potrzebujecie, tylko czy są na sali osoby, które potrzebują. Czy są osoby, które potrzebują tłumaczenia?
Chyba każdy zrozumie z kontekstu chociaż.
Tak? Okej, dobra. Jasne.
Well,
Okay, so
here's my attempt to plug Cthulhu Wars, and I think it'll be convincing. You in the Cthulhu mask. Are you who I think you are? Yep. Okay, stand up and tell them in Polish what you think. You played it. I never met him before coming to Pyrkon.
Gra jest genialna. Zagrajcie, zagrajcie. Tak. $180 to nie są pieniądze, to są grosze, kupujcie.
Zagramy i będziemy wyglądać tak jak ty.
Tak.
Are there any other players of the game here who tried it out? You give them a plug to them if you want, or say it's bad, right?
Też grałeś? Tak?
Cudo. Malutkie, 40-centymetrowe figurki. Cuda, po prostu gra, to nie jest gra planszowa, to jest małe dzieło sztuki.
To jest doświadczenie. It's not a game, it's an experience. Przedstawię teraz drugiego naszego gościa. Piotr Ramel Koryś, zwany również Zwyrolem, przez niektórych, a to Cthulhu. Praise the mighty.
Hail minions!
There are 64 figures in the game.
Okay. Piotr Ramel Koryś, właściciel marki Gramel, wydawca Southern Warsów na Polskę i rzeczy z Severzami związanymi. Poza tym bliski współpracownik Pyrkon Entertainment Group. Na Piotrze daje się korektę redakcji również.
Redakcję,
tak.
No i pisałem parę rzeczy do głosowej.
I witam naszego trzeciego gościa, trzeciego panelistę, Artur. No, nie zauważyliśmy. Artur Gantrzyniec, zwany również Garnkiem, pomysłodawca i autor Warsunga, wspaniałej gry, prawda, w steampunkowym świecie magicznych przygód. Poza tym autor fabuły pierwszego Wiedźmina komputerowego, za którego dostał nominację do Writers Guild Award
Już mi tak nie grać.
Nie, to nie, ja po prostu przedstawiam. Wiesz, to jest taki Oscar dla scenarzystów.
Ale go nie dostałem.
Ale dostać nominację, jak dostać Oscara. Poza tym pochwalę jeszcze tutaj Garnka i jego grę Posąg, Magia Wieku Fary.
Jesteś współautorem.
Dostaliśmy nominację do nagrody Emmy w kategorii Best Writing, no ale też nie wygraliśmy. Ale dostać nominację to jak dostać Oscara, więc jesteśmy strasznie zadowoleni z tego. Miał być tam jeszcze Umberto, ale
To się boi.
Umberto niestety nie dotrze.
Ramel będzie do reprezentacji.
Ramel jak Ramel będzie trzymał mikrofon w lewej ręce, to jest Ramelem, jak w prawej to jest Umberto. Okay, so let's switch to English. Okay, so the title of the panel is Quo Vadis RPG. So, and we have like three approaches to game design, because of course Sandy is I would say second wave of role-playing games, because the first edition of Call of Cthulhu was which year it was?
81.
So it was a couple of years ago, and it's the we can say it's an old school game, because the system that it's based is really close to the things that were invented by Gary Gygax.
It's part of the second wave.
Yeah. Okay.
It's advanced beyond D&D, but
Yeah.
you know, it has skills and stuff, but it's second wave.
Yes. Savage Wars is a core mechanics, and it's slightly more evolved. And I don't mean evolution in a I mean it in a descriptive way, not in a valuing thing. And because we have less skills, less attributes, the mechanics is faster, it's not that detailed, but still it is an approximation of the physics. So let's stick with that. And of course, Volsung is a new wave, or quite a different approach, because it's the task resolution mechanics.
I'm not sure. I would say it's more like savage words, but with some story elements. We have some rules that affect the story, and the whole rule set is meant to simulate more like action movies than the real life physics.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Okay. So the first and obvious question to you guys and to you, ladies and gentlemen, is it actually an evolution?
what?
That this progress that we see, looking at you and your games, can we say it's an evolution, or is that just a coincidence, or any other? What is your view on it?
You mean on the development of systems?
Yes, on the change, actually on the change of the game, of the game mechanics.
Well, I guess what I think is that different game mechanics and new rules make the game better at simulating certain situations or certain types of things the game master wants. But fundamentally, whether a game is fun or not is not dependent on the mechanics at all. It's dependent on the player and the players and the game master. So, I mean, Rhesus is one of the 3 role-playing games I ever play. And anyone here familiar with Rhesus? It has like 2 rules, right? But you can use, so it can't simulate very much.
Yeah.
Okay, it all has to take place inside the heads of the players. Some of the most fun gaming I ever had was playing old D&D back in 1973, and it was like the kludgiest. They didn't even have a combat. They had 2 combat systems, and they couldn't decide which to use. Okay, the magic. No one could figure out the magic system, but fundamentally, so I guess I'm not really that. I mean, I'm old school, so maybe that's why I don't care about mechanics, but I just care about if the game is, the playing game is fun with the players. So maybe that's too negative for these guys.
No, I'm not sure if the change can be described as evolution. I think of it as a change, and I think one of the reasons why the system differentiate, why they change in such a way is that you have to have something new or something that is different from what the other game producers offer. Yeah. Because when you enter the market, you want to say, okay, play my game. The game is different because we have these cool rules, the cool world, stuff like this. And the more products there are on the market, the harder it is to fit in. So you have to change the rules, change the way you think about the game. Just to get to the player.
Yeah, that's a really fair way of putting it. There's really two ways of making someone try out your game. And one is have mechanics that can simulate new stuff, which is you talking about, and the other is to put it in a setting that they haven't experienced before. For example, the Call of Cthulhu game, I know it's really old, but the Call of Cthulhu game used basically the same exact rule system that had been used in several other games. But the setting was new.
Yeah.
And the game was adapted for that setting. I think the mechanics made a little difference because the sanity mechanic, for example, and a few things like that made it easier to be. If you imagine using D&D mechanics to experience a horror setting, I mean, you do get Ravenloft, but it's not really the same. So the mechanics can help a certain aspect. If you wanted to use Call of Cthulhu to simulate a movie setting, for example, you could do it, but it would take extra effort on the part of the game players and the thing, because it's not really meant to do an action movie, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
And there are several games set in Cthulhu universe.
Yes, we have Cthulhu Tech.
Cthulhu Tech. We have Rhythms of Cthulhu,
Train of Cthulhu.
Train of Cthulhu, and
All those games have different approaches.
yeah.
Cthulhu, for example, is a game about the big robots.
Yes, very. That was a different approach to Cthulhu. That have been.
I agree, yes.
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up that maybe they can comment on. I have been told repeatedly, and this is a potential advance in role playing, at least for Poland, that Polish role players don't use figures. in their role playing.
I don't know.
So I'm going to plug the use of figures. Okay, they are extremely useful for several things. Do you guys use figures?
Yeah,
Okay, first off, when there's a question about a tactical situation, and I don't mean combat, it could be combat, but it could just be where are they standing in the control chamber? Right, where are they be? Okay, when you have figures on, even you can draw it on the tabletop, right? Or just like, where is the elephant? Is the question I was having. The elephant's over here. Got it. Okay, I can't shoot him. He's behind it. Or like, hey, they can't see me. I'm behind the stack of books, so I can search the desk and they can't find out. Okay, or whatever you're trying to do, the figures are useful. That now, of course, for that purpose, you could just use like markers. Right?
Yeah.
The other use of figures is it gives you more, I think, emotional investment in the characters and the enemies. Let me give you an example. A while ago I was playing a game and the players met a large kapuhiwa, which is sort of a big Hawaiian spirit. It was a fantasy game I was playing. A big Hawaiian spirit of the blowhole. So I pulled out this great big figure of an Ultraman monster. Okay, put it on the thing and they go, oh, he's really impressive. And you know, anyone here know Ultraman? No?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so it's a big, goofy figure. It's about this high, and of course the players are about this high, so, oh, it's scary, but it's a big, kind of dumb-looking guy. And so they're like, okay. And they went out, and the kapuhiwa asked them for this special artifact, and the artifact was the pallid mask of the King in Yellow. If you played Call of Cthulhu, the pallid mask is bad. They gave it to the kapuhiwa, and then next time they went to meet him, I pulled out a different figure for the kapuhiwa, and it was a large figure by McFarlane of the creature from The Thing. with like the spider legs and everything, and now that's what the Kapahiwa was like. And that had an impact on the players that would not be the same if I just had to talk, oh, now it looks all creepy. They saw this awful creature on their, oh my gosh, what have we done? We should never have given it the mask. And that was an effect that I got with the figure. And of course your imagination is better than a figure, but the figures can stimulate the imagination is what I'm saying.
Kto na sali używa figurek?
So Poland can learn from what we've done.
Those are the people that actually use figures at the sessions.
So do you agree with me? Does it add to the game?
Yeah.
Okay, I realize they're expensive.
There's one more thing.
I think that's more a matter of of habit.
Yes, I agree.
There was one Polish game that tried to introduce figures. I mean, Neuroshima, that's some post-apo game. The combat was very tactical, and the rulebook said try at least drawing the situation, but it would be better if you use figures. But it didn't catch. And as you said about I'm hiding behind the stack of books or stuff like this.
There's knowing where you are in the Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But for example, in my game, to deal with the problem, we have some rules that allow players to introduce facts like this.
There's a special mechanics for players.
So you have rules that help you saying that you are behind the stack of books, and everybody say, okay, so that's it.
So now we know there's a stack of books, and now
or
we know
at least that there's a useful stack of books.
Yeah.
Because if you're a library, then probably books are everywhere. But probably it could be dealt with using figures, but I didn't have the habit. And I wanted to have the situation in game. I wanted to.
Well, of course, yes, but you also said if the person was in the room and in your drawing of it, there was a stack of books. The player has a choice. Either he stays where he is and finds a stack of books that he's in place, or he can go walk over and be behind them, right? So it's.
We have a question.
Are we forced to use grid on our maps to use figures?
I know lots of players that love the grids. I never ever use them. So I just eyeball it. Like for example, if a person is running along somewhere, the distance he runs kind of depends on, I guess it's kind of cinematic. I say, you guys are really scared so you're running further, or I want them to get to the door quicker so I move them a little bit. So I kind of eyeball it. But there's game masters that prefer a grid. But I get by without it. I will say that because of my love for role-playing games, even though Cthulhu Wars is a board game, I made all the figures 28mm scale. So if players wanted, really it's for me, so I can use them in my Call of Cthulhu games. But as long as I can use figures, maybe I'll use it for that. But I always keep that kind of thing in mind. If your game's more tactical, you probably want a grid. But my game's combats are more, Cthulhu combat is not very tactical. It's like, how do I get out of this room?
What's your opinion on grids? Do you want to use square grid or hexagonal?
The advantage of a hexagonal, of a square grid, is that if your characters are often inside structures, it is so much better to draw the building on. Of course, if they're outdoors a lot, hexagonal is better because it's more real directions. So, basically, if someone has a hex grid or a square grid and put it on the table, I'll use it. But I don't, have my own.
There's one more thing that
I just use sheets of paper and draw them.
There's one more thing to this emotional attachment. If you see your actual figure that represents your character, and if you see the game master taking it off the board or off the grid, you feel the sting.
I knock it over.
Yeah. It could,
like, he's laying down in the same. When the monster's falling over, they're like, okay, we're doing better. If it's a combat, it's not always, right? It's called Cthulhu combat is, like I said, not the focus of the game.
Okay, so my next questions to you guys. The market now. What is your experience of the American and global market? Is it easier or harder to sell role-playing games now? Is it harder than it was back in the 90s? But you guys, of course, you weren't selling games in the 90s, obviously.
When I came in, I told you, I think before you guys showed up, I said, I think role-playing games are going to continue being a smaller and less profitable market. However, that said, the advent of Kickstarter and Kickstarter-like things has made it possible for someone to publish a small role-playing game and know if it has a small audience and do it without losing money, which is advantageous.
I think that PDFs market are growing.
Okay, yeah, sure. And now anyone can PDF it.
Yeah. It's easier to publish your game in PDF and sell it.
So the bad side is there's lots of games made by crazy people.
Yes.
But the good thing is there's every kind of game out there. So if you really want a game about car chases before World War I, you can probably find it.
That's a good idea for a game. Write it down.
Crazy people can now do games.
Guys, your view on the market?
Well, I'm selling it mostly through PDF, so I'm a big fan of the ebook market. So this is, for me, this is the best thing that happened to RPGs. So like that people buy PDFs, they play from PDFs, and this is, for me, this is a great thing. They sell better than my normal paper books, so yes.
Okay, I see.
I guess Kickstarter is bigger for us Americans because, I mean, I guess Polish people can't post on Kickstarter at this time.
Yeah,
But it's like Chaosium funded the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu using Kickstarter. You know, they're kind of slacking off on producing that, I think, because it should be out by now. But the point is, they were able to, under normal circumstances, they have all the money up front and do it this way. You can see if people even want it, and then get it out. That's been a lifesaver for small American game companies.
Yeah, we have our own Kickstarter-like services in Poland, and our friend who's...
You have one just for games, right?
No, not really.
No, someone told me there was one just for games in Poland. Seriously, someone told me that.
No.
Right.
Well, it's not that we, think that someone told you that, but there's no Kickstarter-like service just for games. I have two major players.
And our friend who's the publisher of our games is using or use the Kickstarter to kickstart the Beast and Barbarians on paper, the Adventurers, and we will probably use it as a means to bring new paper edition of books here in Polish.
I don't think you need it for a PDF, right?
We did it for Slave Week as well. Garnek. With Slave With Me,
So yeah,
by Jacek. We will do it for my image.
It's not a market.
My image.
we are a small market anyway.
So it's difficult to say.
And
yes.
you know, one thing is that most of the players know English, can read English and use just English ebooks.
Yeah.
So when you
That's
want,
not our fault.
yeah, but when you spend your money, you will probably buy something that has an additional value. So we still can sell paper books because they are also bought as something to have, not only to use. So.
Okay. I've heard that the Kickstarter was a real pain in the ass for the shops and distributors in States. And there was a large buzz about it a couple of years ago, actually 2 years ago. But on the other side...
I mean, 3 years ago, there was about $500,000 worth of games published on Kickstarter. 2 years ago, it was about 7 million. And 1 year ago, it was 50 million. So it's gone for games. And and here's the thing. So Cthulhu Wars, the Kickstarter did 4,400 copies that bought it, right? So that's how many people own it and won't go to a store to buy it. But that means that in Poland, there's about 20 people who kickstarted it. So if there's more than 20 people that would buy it in Poland, there's still a market for the stores if they want it. But the brick and mortar stores they have to face Amazon and other threats as well. Kickstarter without Kickstarter, a lot of the games, Zombicide, Cthulhu Wars, a lot of games simply, it's not just a matter that the stores are hurt, the stores wouldn't even have them to sell if it wasn't for Kickstarter. I could never do Cthulhu Wars without Kickstarter. So the stores are only benefited by Kickstarter because now they can sell them too.
But this is what I heard, or the other side opinion, that the Kickstarter money going straight to the writers and creators of the game will empower them, make them stronger, make them
we don't get all the money, right? Most of it is used to produce the game.
Yeah, but
I didn't buy a new car or anything.
The more the writers, the producers, the creators get, the more games they will make, and it will help the market grow.
There's two really good things about Kickstarter. The first is that if your Kickstarter fails, that is terrific news. It means you know there is not a market for the game, and you shouldn't be spending your money trying to produce it. Think how much, right? That you avoid failures, and that's pretty important in publishing, right? Kickstarter lets you avoid those. You say, hey, nobody wants this game. My first Kickstarter was a complete humiliating failure. And I am glad that I didn't go and invest money to produce that game.
And that said, it changed the title.
The title was the best title in the history of gaming. So we're going to move on. My second Kickstarter, so the first thing is you know if there's someone that wants the game. The second thing, as he said, is that the person doing the game is able to do it without having to go to a publisher and see if they want to play it and have to. And a lot of publishers, well, the ones that are Kickstarter love it, but the ones that are not normal Kickstarter ones that are taking games up for other people, it kind of takes away from them because now, like as he said, the writers and authors and designers have more power. I'm self-publishing called Cthulhu Wars. I'm the publisher because I had enough money from it that I can go to the factory and the printer and make my own and do my own boxes and everything thanks to the Kickstarter. And that I think is better for everyone, not just me. Maybe it's worse for the company that would have published it for me. But another thing is also you can make it as nice as you want. A publisher will always have reasons to cut the corner and make the game cheaper. The designer may also have those same reasons, but he also has more vested in making the game cool, right? He wants to fulfill what he said in the Kickstarter. So Kickstarter in America for games has been a huge positive thing. And if it can be used in Poland to the same extent, whatever your versions of it are.
Our first Kickstarter was a success, so probably there will be others who should have some plans. And
for Beast and Barbarians, we did 500%. No, Nine? Okay, 900% of the goal.
yeah,
So, not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah, and as you said, the good news is that you can see if there is a market for
You can see if there's a failure. That's really important. People say, "Oh, my Kickstarter failed," but that's good to know.
Normally, you would have to produce the game, invest the money, put it to the shops, and then
Put it in your cellar.
that was not a good idea. Yeah?
I know a guy who had 1,500 of the small roulettes,
Yeah.
back in his garage because his game did not sell good.
Yeah.
So,
So stuff like this happen.
all the time.
But now it's less likely to happen. That's good. Fewer of us go bankrupt making a failed game, and we can pay for our games up front with the money from the Kickstarter,
Yes.
so that we aren't out of pocket, which is kind of nice. Now, of course, that's greed talking. but,
but
it is
yeah,
useful.
it's fair if you pay the artists up front, you pay the writers up front, you pay for print up front. That makes you as a creator feel better.
It is,
isn't it?
as time goes on, it's clearly a completely new way of making games. Okay, PDFs are also new, not as new, but they're also new. So these new ways of making games, they're not transforming the game's designs, but they're transforming the way they get to you, and I think in a way that's good for you. I will say that when you're looking at a game like on Kickstarter, there's two things to look at. The first is obviously, oh, is this a cool game I want to support? And the second thing is, do I trust this guy who's doing it? Is he going to deliver? What's his past history, right?
I think it's the other way around, because the trust for the creator goes further.
Well,
I'm talking about my personal opinion.
well, I will just, here's what I'm saying. They're both important. I'm saying that if you're not interested in the game, no matter how much you trust the guy doing it, why would you invest? So first you have to want to invest, then you say, oh, but it's this guy, forget it. That's all I'm saying. Stage one, do I like it? Stage two, oh, I'm not giving these guys money. Or I am. That was an advantage for me in my Kickstarter because people kind of knew who I was and trusted me.
I played the Call of Cthulhu by Sandy Petersen, and now Sandy Petersen is publishing his new game. Wow! Call of Cthulhu was great. I don't care what is the new game about, but I know that he can deliver.
Yeah, I can see it going the other way around. If you're looking for someone that you like, if you really like Reiner Knizia, right, then to say, oh, he's doing a new game, I don't care what it's about. It's going to be about adding up things and bidding. I love that, because that's how all his games are.
Okay, do you have any questions, maybe, folks? Okay, so the next question is from me. Okay. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I was going to say, I had my suggestion for the advancement of gaming in Poland with figures. You guys know Polish gaming a lot better than me. Do you have, and I just hit upon this when it came to the question. Do you have other things they could learn? I was told by a person here in Poland that role-playing in Poland is still kind of in its infancy. There's not very many games that appear at the convention. Board games are a lot more popular.
Yes.
So maybe there's a lot. Well, it takes a long time to play role-playing games. Maybe there's movement that could be done there. I don't know. You guys.
Well, I've been trying to promote using mini features in my game because as I said, I published Savage Worlds, which uses
Let me make it clear. You don't need to buy the special figures for a game.
No.
Buy any random figures.
Especially that I'm making free.
Early
PDFs
on,
with,
I used chess
figures.
pieces. Right? The king was really scary.
And I must say, people started to use minis, to use grids and such things, but it's still not the same as in USA.
It's not the default.
It has novelty.
The US a player will come to your game and he'll bring his figure.
Yes.
For his guy.
So that doesn't happen.
Maybe we should promote bigger tables for players.
The bigger homes for families.
Maybe, yeah. But you know, last month I was playing some science fiction games with my friends, and actually we started using markers, but we were using our dice because
It's useful.
yeah, we needed to know how we are, how the ships are, located, how they are.
Exactly.
So,
Sometimes the 3D relationship matters.
but I didn't realize that was something new. We just did it and forget about it. So maybe maybe you should write something, the magic miecza.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Promote dice and figures. Because, po polsku pytanie, Because, for our game, for Volsung, we have a deal with the company that makes minis, and we have like two of those made, And the guys then started the skirmish game, the tabletop skirmish game. So, because it was selling so bad for the role players that they had to create a market, create a game for it. And there is a skirmish game based on Volsung with really beautiful miniatures.
Well, I mean, it's not just like miniatures. Maybe there's other things that Poland needs more of. I don't know. I mean, why isn't there a whole bunch of rooms dedicated to role playing here at this convention?
There are a couple of them, but you know, this is the place.
No, I'm not condemning it. I'm asking. If you go to an American convention, there will be sometimes dozens of rooms, each with 2 or 3 or 4 role-playing sessions happening at the same time.
And this is the specifics of the location we are in. Most of the Polish conventions are held in schools. We rent the school for the weekend, and then just share the rooms for the program and for the sleeping rooms, and then what's left goes for the game sessions, labs and stuff like
We are
this.
talking about smaller conventions.
Yes, much smaller than this.
But a larger convention should have even more. For example, let's look at this room. You could easily fit 12 role-playing sessions in here that would be far enough apart they wouldn't interfere. You have a question?
No, it's not a question. May I add something, like explain the situation? May I? Okay. So I think it's actually your fault. Because, yes, it's your fault because the Call of Cthulhu introduced, this idea of atmosphere and mood. And here in Poland, I think we take it really seriously. Like, I think that it would be quite difficult to organize like 12 or 20 sessions in here because it wouldn't be like, a proper place to create, that atmospheric.
Okay, maybe Call of Cthulhu wouldn't be as good in this big room, but there's smaller rooms around the edge that you can put a game
Okay,
in.
so,
These are actually set for role-playing games at this convention.
so what I'm getting at is, okay, and it could be also some explanation why we do not use miniatures. Because in Poland, I think that the kind of, narrativist and immersionist approach is very popular. So
Or was for some time.
no, it is.
It is still
okay.
popular.
So still lots of people just love to play
Get scared.
without
What's even- Let me have one thing there. There's a substantial number of players that don't use dice on their games.
Yes.
Not the miniatures is the problem. The dice are the problem with them.
I actually agree.
Miniatures would be like
As you
this.
can see, we have
Like a
some,
heresy.
political parties.
It's not a problem.
Yeah.
It is,
When you start talking about
it is absolutely impossible to get the figures you need for a full Cthulhu game. No one has made the figures for these things, right? And if they did, it wouldn't be the figure you wanted because of your personal imagination for it. But the humans can still have figures, okay? And sometimes you can put something else, describe it for the physical 3D relationships and said, yes, I know it looks like a bat out of hell, but it is actually a bat out of hell. And you're not, so I understand that. And you know what, I'll tell you the truth. When I play my role-playing games, we don't use the miniatures every step of the way. When there's a point where we say we have to know what's going on here, the layout of the house and where we are, then we'll put the miniatures out to see it. But they aren't on the tabletop every time. We aren't moving them like a board game, okay? And as far as dice go, I like using dice for randomization of things because when I don't, I feel like the players think everything's my arbitrary choice.
Yeah.
Because it is. But when there's something that's really important to me to happen, I don't roll dice for it. If I need the thing to burst in the door and crash through and knock someone down, I don't roll dice and say it. I said it burst through the door, and knocks one of you down. So there's a time when dice are useful, and there's a time when they're not. And there's a time when figures are useful, and there's times when you don't need them.
Mam pytanie?
Yes,
You can sit down.
And I
and
admit
relax.
it's my fault that there's a lot of atmosphere.
Actually, you're Mark Reinhagen's, because he's the other part. Reinhagen, the proper White Wolf. The vampire creator.
Oh, yeah.
Mark
The
Reinhagen.
White Wolf, yeah.
Yeah, why?
Okay, so he had a question.
Yes, it's an open discussion maybe for consideration. Isn't that people consider RPG games as a cheap entertainment because we don't need to invest in figures and dice and but
Well, you don't need to.
yeah, but it has changed last time. But before, several years ago in Poland, figures, dice were relatively expensive. So
They're expensive in America too.
yeah, but for Polish people, I think they're more expensive. Well, but they accustomed to play without it, to play with let's say minimum effort, minimum cost. Maybe that's the reason that we are accustomed to play without dice or figures.
Maybe it's the other way because, for example, in America the RPG grow from miniature games, and in Poland RPGs are from RPGs.
No. The first RPGs, we didn't have miniatures. I promise it didn't come from it. Well, okay, Gary Gygax did when he was designing it, but the players outside when the D&D was published, none of us had access to any miniatures. Miniatures were very obscure. They were mostly just for Napoleonic things. And miniatures only gradually started to make their way. It wasn't really until the 1980s that you could go to a store and buy a miniature. But yeah, so we started out the same way you did. Maybe it's just the Polish gaming is still in its infancy, you know. But yeah, but sorry, I lost my train of thought. Must have been a lie.
We Polish try to be efficient in financial efficient as possible. Sorry, it's maybe not the real.
We are cheap bastards, sorry.
Pytanie? Proszę.
I would like to continue this issue. There is one other thing. The players and RPGs in Poland are not meant. Well, people don't do very long
Campaigns?
campaigns. Yes, they are.
Well, some do.
Yes, most of the.
Who has played in a campaign that lasted longer than 3 years? Who has, so almost like at least half of you have not. Who has played in a campaign that lasted longer than 1 year? Okay, who has not played in a campaign that lasted more than a year? Okay, that's quite a few.
I mean, not that they don't happen, but people play different games and different characters. And if you...
I was surprised by that many people not playing a campaign that lasted a year. So I see what you're saying.
There is big choice of players to play 1 session games or 3 sessions, 6 sessions. Even when a game is like my Vampire for 2 years, there was cuts for other games, and the sessions were for about 20, not one in the week for 2 years every time, or even 2.
So you are saying that we as players are
Like to
more like to try different things and try different games. So
I mean, even
that's an interesting observation.
even different characters in the same setting. So people don't want to use miniatures whose what is designed and looks alike.
But you know, you can just use tokens. Yeah.
Or just a bit of sheet of paper and a pencil.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something to that because I don't know, for me, the goal is to forget that I'm actually playing a game. So dices are kind of bad enough in that respect, but to add figures to it would be another thing that reminded me that I was playing a game. Because for me the goal is to immerse myself in the world, in the character, and kind of be there.
But that's not how they work in practice, at least when I use them. Because what happens is it gives you a concrete understanding of, oh, now I see. If you're moving the figure like a board game, you're saying, okay, now I understand where I am in relationship to the elephant. then in your mind, you understand where you are instead of it being kind of vague and things moving around randomly. And if you use like for example with my players, I brought up the big goofy thing, and I didn't say that Kabuki would look just like the big goofy thing. I said, here's him. Then they came out all scary, and they go, oh my gosh. And so they in that event at least, were not taken out by it. They're like, now I see. And we didn't move the monster around and fight them. It was just like a symbolic representation of the mistake they've made. So that's why you can use figures to effectively keep you in the world, I believe. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree, because I'm a big fan of miniatures, as I said.
Well, explain to her why they don't destroy the game.
Maybe
you can do it in Polish.
No, maybe because I like play games, and for me it's I'm playing the game. Simply, it's mention.
So what you are saying is to use miniature figures as tools to make the story more concrete, more
Yes.
tangible. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, obviously, my game Call of Cthulhu is not about combat, right? It's about atmosphere. Sorry, and setting up a situation and having things happening that are creepy. That the players and you can't have a scary game if you're moving your guys around on the grid. Like combat units, okay? But the players still can understand, like I said, where they are, what's happening. For example, they're in a car chase. I've done this before. I got a toy car, and we're moving it on the table as it's being chased by some flying thing. And seeing how the car moves and goes around the curves, they were like mentally hearing the screech of the tires, but they could see where the curves are. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a huge curve up there. We're going to go off the cliff, and it's going to explode in midair because that's what cars do cinematically. and that I think did not destroy the feel of the game, right? But obviously it has to be the game master and players too.
It is all in the mind of gamers, really, because when you see your character, well, you can imagine better. That's how it works for me.
One more word about figures. I think in the near future we have a great opportunity for cheap figures in
3D printers.
They're not really that cheap.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if we are talking about figures that
the plastic for the figures is actually quite expensive. So like to make Cthulhu in 3D printing would be like a $20 figure.
Okay.
But I can make.
And that doesn't count the pretty machine.
But I can make my personal figure.
I'm just talking about the cost of plastic.
Yeah.
You still have to pay for your plastic when you make your own.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you can't make it out of like regular plastic. Now the cost will go down. Well, Cthulhu might be cheaper than, I don't know, but but then the other problem is then, of course, then there'd be a market for someone doing the 3D files to plug into your printer.
From my experience, I can say that figurines have like a great advantage. Because when you have a combat, or not actually combat, just something that has action or fast pace, everybody has to know what's happening, where are they, and it's really hard to tell everybody where they are. It takes a long time when you have to tell everybody where they are, and there are still some mistakes, because one person thinks that they are 2 meters away, and somebody thinks it's 20 meters, and it's really easier to
Figures are really, really useful if you're doing combat. If you're not doing combat, I still think there's advantages to it.
Yes, because you can imagine your character, really.
Yeah. Well, also like the car chase thing I did with the toy car. I mean, there was no combat in that. But as the players, as I said, here's the road, and they're like, oh my gosh, drive this car well.
Okay, all right, guys. Last question from me. Where do you see yourselves in a gaming world in 10 years? What game would you be, I don't know, selling, designing? What game will surround you? And what the gamers would look like? What games would you play?
Older. You look older.
No, maybe you.
Well, my current group of players have been playing in my campaign for 6 years, This is after my previous campaign, which with the same players lasted 14 years.
Are the same characters? Or?
Well, there was changeovers in the characters, but there was the same players in the same campaign. There was 14 years. After the 14 years, they realized they had come to a point where this campaign was now over. And we all agreed it's time to start a new campaign. We set the new campaign in the same world. This is a fantasy campaign we played. And later on in the new world, they went back and met their old characters. And their old characters were completely ruthless and horrible to them. And captured them and sentenced them to death and were terrible, something like that. So I tend to like the long campaigns. So I guess in 10 years, I don't know if I'll still be in this exact same campaign, but I might be based on the fact my campaigns are so long. As far as other things I'll be doing as a game master, I'm hoping that my new company that does board games will like not be bankrupt and dead, and I'll still be doing those and be successful, even to still be small. I recently started writing. I've always done scenarios for Call of Cthulhu just for my own use at conventions, but I actually wrote my first scenario for publication in probably 8 years. Actually, it was for a Brazilian. They have a Brazilian thing that's not called Kickstarter, but it is Kickstarter for Brazil. And the Brazilian edition of Call of Cthulhu, as one of their stretch goal rewards, they paid for me. It was cheap. I like the guy that's doing it, Petersen, to write a scenario just for that thing. So I wrote my first scenario. So Kickstarter got me to write the Call of Cthulhu scenario, which I assume will eventually not just be in Portuguese, but also available elsewhere. So I guess I'll still be writing. I mean, all I have done my entire adult life is be a game designer. I know that is kind of pathetic. But most people have had some kind of actual career doing other things first, with experience of different aspects of the world. But I've just always done games, so I can't really imagine not doing games. I guess for 2 years I was a teacher. I taught game design, though, to graduate level students. So I don't know if that counts as not doing games. So it's like, if you were asking me how will it be like when I'm living on the moon, I'm like, well, I can't really imagine that, but I can't imagine myself not doing games because it's all I've ever done.
Piotrze?
I think I'll be still playing Savage Wars, really. It's a game I like. And I think I'll be still publishing it. I hope so.
How about the games you predicted could emerge on the market? Any ideas?
I don't know right now. Just think about 1 year, so that 10 years.
Are you talking about how the gaming world will change?
Yeah.
I think that at a minimum, the combination of Kickstarter and PDFs and 3D printing is going to transform the world in ways that I don't think we can predict.
Yeah.
You can't know.
So you guys don't see anything big in augmented reality? I don't know, using your...
Oh, you mean technological stuff?
Yes.
Well, okay. Would you guys count MMOs as a role-playing experience?
No. But online gaming, RPG gaming
yes.
online, remotely.
Is it Skype?
It is hard to. It's always if you try to be a prophet.
You guys are in Poland. It's a little tiny country. You can get together to play.
It's hard to be a prophet. It's usually funny when you look back at your prophecies after several years.
My son Skypes for gaming because he's separated from his brothers and friends. I know other guys, so they're Skyping and gaming. That'll be used, but that's doesn't change the nature of the game.
Yeah.
She has a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask about computer games, because nowadays we see that every game has to have a multiplayer mode, even RPGs. I was wondering how much.
I am proud to say that I was the chief designer on the game Doom, which is the first game to break that barrier and make games be multiplayer. I think that the fact that computer games became multiplayer, instead of always being you just with the computer, is a huge advantage in contacting other people.
So it is your fault.
It is absolutely my fault.
Yeah, but
Again. Well, it wasn't just me. the guys that worked on that game. Shame on you.
Necessary with RPGs, considering the fact that in most games like first-person shooters and such, multiplayers tend to overshadow the single-player campaign. And in an RPG, the story is the most...
But the reason that they overshadow it is because it is way more fun to go up against or ally with a human instead of a robot. That's why an MMO, where you're getting together with other guys to go through the story and fight the Monkey King, is different from when you are playing a computer role-playing with a story. I don't regard a single-player role-playing game on a computer as a role-playing game. It's a story game where you have to go through the right hoops. You don't really get to role-play. It doesn't matter if you talk with a Scottish accent, right? It doesn't matter if you say that your character is kind of homely, because no one cares in the game. In an MMO, they care how you talk. And in a game with other people, they care how you are. And as far as the story goes, there's different ways you can do role-playing games. I'm talking about the tabletop ones. Some players and campaigns, they really like following that story. Okay? I'm going to say that I'm not one of those guys. I like the experience of the interaction. When I set up my scenarios, anyone go to my scenario thing? It was yesterday morning or... Okay, do you remember how I mentioned that I don't know how my scenarios end up? I just set up the situation and let the players figure it out. That's not for everyone.
And then you use their ideas.
Yes. Sometimes they'll be discussing something and I'll listen and go, oh, that's a good idea. But I like to set up a situation, and for my gaming group, not true for everyone, I think they like knowing that it's on them to solve it. They don't just have to look for the breadcrumbs I left and figure it out. Now I have some ideas for how it might end up, but it's on them. So I don't think a gameplay. Here's the thing: we already have lots of really good ways of telling stories in the world, and role playing can be one, but I don't think it has to be just that.
Okay, so
Sorry, that was a little tirade, it's a rant, because I feel really strongly about. I've seen a big tendency in modern role-playing games to only be about telling the game master story, and I'm sort of opposed to that. So that's. I think it has
okay. Thank you. We run out of time.
Sorry.
Thank you guys for coming.
You don't want to say more about that?
Thank you for